Lena Ashwood had never asked for much: a warm place to sleep, a kind word before sunrise. Maybe, on her best days, the quiet comfort of knowing she belonged somewhere. But belonging was a luxury in the Silverstone pack, and Lena had spent most of her 22 years learning how to make herself small enough to fit into the spaces no one else wanted. She was the daughter of an Omega, the lowest rank in the pack's long and prideful history. Her mother had been gentle and tired in equal measure, a woman who hummed old songs while she worked, and never once complained about the life the moon had given her. Lena had inherited the humming. She had also inherited the gentleness. In a world that rewarded strength above everything else, those two things were not always gifts. So when the mate bond snapped into place on the night of the blood moon, when that invisible golden thread pulled itself tight between Lena's chest and the chest of the most powerful man alive, she did not feel like someone who had been chosen. She felt like someone who had made a terrible mistake just by standing in the wrong room. King Darius Voss did not laugh when he felt it. He was not the kind of man who laughed at things that surprised him. He simply turned his dark eyes toward her, let them rest on her face for exactly 3 seconds, and then turned away. The hall, full of warriors and nobles and high-ranking wolves, buzzed with whispers that moved like fire through dry grass. Some covered their mouths, some did not bother. A few looked at Lena with something close to pity, which was somehow worse than the laughter. Darius said nothing. He gave her a room in the east wing of his palace, assigned her the title of King's Mate in the official record books, and then proceeded to live as though she did not exist. Lena told herself it would get better. She was good at telling herself things. She left warm meals outside his study door every evening. She would cook them herself in the small kitchen near her room. Simple things, nothing fancy, just food made with care, and set them on the floor beside his door with a cloth napkin folded neatly on top. She never heard him open the door while she was still in the hallway. By morning, the trays were always gone. She chose to believe that meant something. She stood at the edge of every pack gathering, hoping that one evening he would turn and reach his hand back for her. He never did. She sat through feast nights and council celebrations, and the great outdoor fire ceremonies of midwinter, always at the far end of the table, always just outside the circle of warmth, always watching the back of his head and wondering what it would take to make him see her. She cried at night. Not loudly, she had never been a loud person, but deeply. The kind of crying that does not make much noise because it has been practiced too many times. She pressed her face into her pillow and let herself fall apart for exactly as long as she needed to, and then she washed her face and went to sleep, and woke up the next morning. She always tried again. His beta, a broad and quietly guilty man named Marcus, watched all of it. The king's gamma's mate, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, watched all of it too. The kitchen staff watched. The palace guards watched. Everyone in the Silverstone pack, it seemed, could see exactly what was happening. Everyone except the one person who had the power to change it. What no one knew, what Darius had never told another living soul, was that he saw it too. He heard the soft knock on his study door every third evening. He heard the careful placement of the tray on the stone floor, followed by the quiet retreat of footsteps that never once slammed, never once stomped, never once demanded anything from him. He noticed the way the pack children ran to her during morning training, grabbing at her hands and making her laugh. He noticed the way the oldest warriors in the pack, men who bowed to no one, softened when she walked past them. He noticed the mate bond pulling at the center of his chest, like something alive and patient, waiting for him to stop running. But Darius Voss had made a promise at 17 years old, standing in the cold earth beside his mother's grave. His father had been a hard king and a harder man, and his mother had been the price of that hardness. Loved too openly, used too easily, taken by enemies who knew exactly where her husband's weakness lived. Darius had covered her with soil, and promised himself that he would never, not once, give anyone that kind of reach inside him. Not a friend, not an ally, not even the mate the moon herself had chosen for him. He told himself he was protecting her by keeping his distance. He told himself he was protecting the pack. On the worst nights, when the bond ached so badly it felt like a bruise beneath his ribs, he told himself he was protecting himself. And that, at least, was honest. The night of their first anniversary passed without a word between them. Every bonded pair in the pack celebrated with the traditional bonding rite, A small private ceremony, shared fire, a spoken promise renewed. Darius attended a war council. Lena sat alone in her room, with her hands folded in her lap, and listened to the sounds of celebration drifting up from the courtyard below. She did not knock on his door that night. She did not leave a tray. Something very small inside her went quiet. It took 3 more months for the rest of her to follow. Marcus found the letter on a gray Tuesday morning when he went to bring her breakfast, a habit he had developed out of guilt and kept out of something closer to care. Her room was empty. The bed had been made with the kind of neatness that meant it had been done deliberately, a final act of tidiness from someone who had decided they were done waiting. The few things she had brought with her from her mother's village, a small wooden box, a worn blanket in deep blue wool, a single photograph, were gone. On the pillow, there was a folded piece of paper. No seal, no name on the front. Marcus read it with hands that were not entirely steady. She had not written in anger. That was the part that hit him hardest, and would stay with him longest. There was no bitterness in it, no list of wrongs, no demand for acknowledgement. She had simply written the truth in the clearest, quietest words he had ever read. She said she had loved Darius from the moment the bond formed. She said she had stayed long past the point where the staying had stopped being hope and started being harm. She said she was not leaving because she hated him, but because she had realized, slowly and painfully, that invisibility was its own kind of slow disappearing act, and she was not ready to disappear entirely. At the bottom of the letter, in small, careful handwriting, she had written, "I was not born to be a ghost. I hope one day you find the courage to let someone see you. I genuinely hope it is not too late when you do." Marcus brought the letter to Darius without a word, and set it on his desk, and left the room. Darius read it standing up. He read it once all the way through. Then he sat down and read it again. He sat at his desk for a long time after that without moving, one hand pressed flat against the paper, as though he were trying to feel something through it. That evening, the mate bond fractured. It did not break cleanly. It did not snap. It fractured the way old wood fractures under pressure, slowly, with a sound that seemed to travel through everything it was connected to. And because the bond between an alpha king and his true mate was not simply a personal thread, but the spiritual foundation of the entire pack's unity, every wolf in Silverstone felt it happen. Warriors who had been mid-sparring dropped to their knees without knowing why, overcome by a grief that had no name they could put to it. Mothers held their children tighter. Bonded pairs across the territory felt their own connections shiver, as though something deep in the earth had shifted. The pack healer, a very old woman named Rowan who had served 3 kings and outlived 2 of them, walked into Darius's study that night without knocking, and stood before him with the kind of expression that required no softening. She told him what the oldest pack texts had always said, and what every alpha since the beginning had been warned of, and chosen to dismiss as legend. The bond between a true alpha king and his mate was not meant for his benefit alone. It was the root beneath the tree. It sustained the whole pack, their strength, their cohesion, their instincts, as a collective people. A king who starved the root starved everyone. She looked at him the way only very old women look at very powerful men, when those men have done something preventable and costly. "Go find her," she said. "Not for the pack. For yourself first. Everything else will follow." Darius left before she finished speaking. He did not take guards. He did not send messengers ahead. He shifted into wolf form and ran harder than he had run since he was young, and still thought speed could solve things, following the faint thread of the bond that remained, thin as a single strand of light in a dark room but still there, still holding. He tracked her scent across 2 territories, through the wide eastern forest, to a small Omega settlement beside the Ashwood River, where her mother's sister kept a garden and an open door. He found her in that garden. She was kneeling in the dirt with her hands in the soil, planting something small. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She was not crying. She looked, for the first time since he had known her, entirely at peace, and that fact hit him somewhere deep and specific, because he understood that the peace had not come from happiness. It had come from having finally stopped waiting for something that had not come. She looked up when she heard the gate. She saw him standing there, still breathing hard from the run, not fully shifted back, nothing kingly about him at all in that moment, And she did not run to him. She did not smile. She simply looked at him with her gray eyes and waited. He had planned words. He had built careful sentences on the long run over, logical and structured, the way he built everything. Standing in front of her, every single one of them left him. What came instead was the truth, not the managed version, the actual one. He told her about his mother. He told her about the grave and the cold, and the promise made at 17, by a boy who was so frightened of losing anyone else, that he had decided the safest move was to simply refuse to hold on to anything. He told her that he had heard every knock on his door, that he had noticed every meal, every gathering, every quiet retreat of her footsteps down the hallway. He told her that he had catalogued every act of love she had offered him, and had used each one to quietly confirm to himself that the bond was real, and then immediately used that same confirmation as a reason to pull further away, because real things could be taken from you, and he had already lost too much to survive losing something real again. He told her he had been the most powerful alpha alive, and the most devastating kind of coward at the same time, and that he was sorrier than he had words for. He did not ask her to come back. He did not ask her to forgive him. He knelt down in the garden dirt in front of her, the Alpha King of Silverstone, in the yard of an Omega settlement, and he told her that if she chose to stay gone, he would spend every remaining day of his life making sure she was safe, comfortable, honored, and never invisible to the world again. Even from a distance, even with a broken bond, even if it meant living the rest of his life with that fracture in his chest. "You were never a ghost," he said. "I was just too afraid to open my eyes, and I am so sorry that my fear became your cage." Lena was quiet for a long time. A single tear moved down her face. She did not hide it. She let him see it, and she let him sit with what it meant, and she did not rush past it. Then she asked him one question. "If I come back, will you let me stand beside you? Not behind you, not in a room no one visits. Beside you, where I should have been from the beginning." He answered without pausing. "In front of me, if you want. You should have been the first thing people saw when they looked at this pack. I am sorry it took me this long to understand that." She did not go back with him that day. She made him wait 2 weeks, and he waited without complaint, without a single message that asked her to hurry, without pressure of any kind. He wrote her letters every few days, short ones, clumsy ones, a man who had spent his whole life speaking in commands, slowly learning a completely different language. The letters were honest in the way only writing to someone you have already lost everything with can be honest. She read each one twice. When she came home, Darius met her at the main gates of Silverstone in front of the entire pack. He took her hand. He introduced her not simply as his mate, but as his queen, and in wolf culture, those 2 words carried very different weight. One was a bond, the other was a choice. The pack understood the difference. The bond steadied overnight. The healers said they had never seen a fracture repair itself so completely. Rowan said it was because the healing had not been forced or rushed, it had been earned. Lena built something real in Silverstone. She started the first Omega Welfare Council the pack had ever had. She opened the bonding rites ceremonies to all ranks. She sat in council meetings and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived being invisible and come out the other side knowing exactly what she had to say. Darius listened. Every time. He kept her letter in the drawer of his desk for the rest of his life. On the hard days, when the old fear tried to creep back in, he would open the drawer and look at it, not to read it, because he had long since memorized every word, but simply to remember what it had cost him, what it had almost taken from him forever. The pack did not just recover, it became something new, not the most feared, but the most whole, and people across the territory told the story for generations, always ending it the same way. The moon does not make mistakes. She simply waits for you to stop making them.